begin in just a few moments, but before we begin, here are a few reminders. For the comfort and safety of those around you, remain seated during the presentation, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the theater. And please, supervise your children.
Permanecer sentados, por favor.
Eating and drinking are permitted, but we do ask that you deposit your trash in the bins provided as you leave the theater. As a courtesy to our presenters and everyone else in the theater, refrain from flash photography and turn off or silence your cell phones. Also, we ask that there be no texting during the presentation. The texting lamp is out. And now, stage 23, as part of our celebration of 60 years of Walt Disney Imagineering, is pleased to present the DNA of Innovation. Please welcome your host, Imagineer Asa Kalama.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is really exciting. So, my name is Asa Kalama, and for the past 9 years I have had the distinct pleasure at working at Walt Disney Imagineering, just a small drop in the bucket of the 60 years of amazing legacy of creating wonderful rides, shows, attractions. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about the people and the process behind all those wonderful experiences. And to do that, we've assembled a really phenomenal panel of Imagineers, both past and present. So please join me in welcoming Bob Gurr, Susan Robert, and Scott Gilbert.
Sorry, I'm tweeting real time.
Go for it.
I like the music.
Yeah, I would like a little more wobble bass.
I want to kick this off old school.
So, one of the most amazing things to sort of me as a young Imagineer is really sort of understanding and appreciating what it was like to create the theme parks from the ground up, right? 60 years ago, there was no blueprint, there was no set of instructions for how to create this amusement enterprise. And so, one of my absolute favorite stories is one that Bob sort of tells about the experience of creating the monorail for the very first time. And I would be wondering if you'd be so kind as to sort of regale us with a little bit of that tale.
Sonny, you really want to hear it?
I do.
All right. Imagineering is highly organized today. The most recent monorail, the Mark 7, was placed into service about 6 years ago after a 4.5-year design development. We do test and adjust. We've been doing test and adjust ever since we put the Mark 7 into service. Now, would you like to know how we did it in the old days?
Yes, please.
We didn't use the 4.5 years. We did it in 8.5 months. From the first word to giving the Vice President of the United States a ride on it, we did our test and adjust the night before.
That sounds familiar.
No, really, it's a true story. Some of you have heard this story, but he wants to hear it. He's never heard it.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, okay, all right. We put the train on the track 2 weeks before the scheduled date, and this was going to be the inauguration, and Walt calls up one of his buddies, a guy by the name of Dick, and he said, "Hey Dick, come on up from the White House, bring the wife and the kids. We got this new train, and I want you to cut the ribbon for it." So we got the train on the track, and during the 2-week period. The first trip was about 1/8 of an inch, and then something blew up. And Walt was sitting in the train, you know. He didn't stay where he just got off and left. Every day the train would go about 1/2 a lap, and it would either break or catch on fire, one or the other. And the night before the dedication, I drove that train around, one lap around, and it worked beautiful, really smooth. Actually got one lap, so I parked it in the station where we're going to cut the ribbon the next day. And this was going to be on a live TV program. So I didn't want to take it back in the barn. Anyway, in the morning, about 11 o'clock, here comes Walt. Oh my God, he's got the Vice President of the United States, got the wife, the 2 girls, some of our security, and some White House Secret Service. And Walt wants to show off this brand new train. So it was a hot day. So I said, well, just a minute, I got to get the power turned on, get the air conditioning going so we can get to the front of the train. And so we all pile in the front of the train, and Walt introduces everybody around. And Walt says, well, Dick, you know, I'm the steam guy. I drive the steam trains. But this is modern electric, so I let Bobby drive it. And then Walt says, well, give him a ride. I didn't say a word, I just drove off. Nixon, as you know, was full of 4-letter words, and when we made the right turn, and then we made the left turn, we came back down over the submarine falls where you can see the platform, and Nixon noted in an instant that the 5 Secret Service guys were all on the platform, and of course he had some 4-letter words to say about that, and kind of appalled me, and then I thought, my God, I just kidnapped the Vice President. We had not figured out our safety access when the train catches fire over the sub lagoon. We don't have the ladders out there yet. So how am I going to explain that we burned up the President of the United States? I would have saved Watergate had I done that. Anyway, we came around the station. I was relieved we were going to stop. And then Walt says, well, go again? I don't even remember the second trip. I mean, it was like, I had 2 laps out of this train. Came back around, we stopped the train. No, when I was going through the station for the second lap, the Secret Service were running toward the train, and then as I went through the station, they're running with it. and then, anyway, we came back out, they all got off, and then Nixon walked all the way down the bottom ramp, and then I noticed he turned around and looked up. The Secret Service were sitting in the train. They hadn't even followed him down. Meantime, there's a German engineer, Conrad Deller, that came up from all the way to help me with it. And he's watching this zoo the whole time. And he's just shaking, and he's so mad. He says, Mr. Bob, he says, in Germany we spend 7 years and 7 million marks, and we don't let the public on it. You crazy Disney people, you put your Vice President on it and only runs 1 day. So, you can see there's a big difference between the way we used to do stuff, which was high-speed, informal, no committees, no meetings, no Xerox, no texting, no computers, no nothing. You guys have all the tools today, and you take years to do them. Well, you asked,
Thank you for that, Bob. That's actually a perfect segue to my good friend Dave Durham. So, Dave, tell us a little bit about some of these new tools and technologies that we now have.
So we like to take years when we build things. Today. I actually want to hear about this regimented process, the playbook. I want to hear about how we have it all figured out, because that's news to me, and I want to hear about that.
Scott being my boss, I would like to also see that.
So Bob is a great example of just get it done. And you put the show together, and you open the barn doors, and it's amazing, it works. And we've done a lot of things that way. Today, we look at things a little differently. It's neither good nor bad, it's just different. And what you're going to hear today from the different panelists are the fact that we use a lot of different innovation in a lot of different ways. When I came to Imagineering back in 1989, we were using this brand new thing called a computer. And we thought it had potential. I was one of the first Imagineers to actually use a computer, and they used this brand new thing called Photoshop. It was Photoshop version 1. Anybody can actually remember? It really was version 1. And we started with, we were working on Westcott, which was a concept for a park to go, actually, where DCA is now. Some people remember Westcott. We spent a few years on it. It was one of the first projects we actually did a lot of computer animation for. So we actually did 3D models. We actually did some Photoshop work. Believe it or not, Photoshop back then had no layers. There was no undo command. Yeah. And when I was looking back through the old files, this one was labeled high res. It's 1,200 pixels wide. That was considered high res back then. So back in '89, we started with stills. We started with stills and simple animation. A couple years later, we actually went to our first animatics, and this was an early version of Indiana Jones. And this is looking at the entire ride with the roof off, and you've got the little vehicles all moving around. We call it the ant view. And this took about 3 months to do. Today, we could whip this out in a day and a half easily. It will look much nicer. But back then, this was cutting edge. This was how we were trying to look at innovation. And it wasn't so much about, well, this is a cool tool, let's force a way to use it. No, it was this is an opportunity. Is there a place that we can leverage it in our attraction design, in our ideation? And that's a perfect example. We move up forward a little bit, and we had this thing called Tower of Terror, which we had in Florida, and we were going to build a version in California, but we wanted it to be a little different for several reasons. So as we were playing with some different configurations, it became obvious pretty quickly this was very confusing to explain to people. Now, we want to do it this way instead of that. So we actually used a computer to just do some animatics and trying to show different versions. This is not the version we ended up using, although there were a number of different versions we looked at. But again, just using computers in an innovative way to try to help show what something could be like. Here's an example of Hong Kong for Winnie the Pooh. And this is, again, as you'll see, the years are clicking up. This is using computers to actually do simulations. So instead of this being an animation where you simply animate everything in advance, this is actually a simulation where we tell the vehicle how you're supposed to work, and we tell the doors how they're supposed to work, and we tell the speeds, and we have variability, and we actually hit the go button, sit back and watch it for the first time, and we can actually see how it's actually going to be in the attraction. Not how it's designed perfectly to be, but how it's going to be with real guests on a normal day. That's pretty cool. And then we just advance up as you see the years clicking. Next one up would be something like Nemo subs. We did a lot of pre-visualization. Because you're going into an existing facility, you've got these giant submarines that are really long. This was a place where we really leveraged our creative technology group, which is tasked with doing a lot of pre-visualization. So it's dedicated engineers, software programmers, and artists to simply come up with ways to not just show something pretty, but actually come up with new tools to actually help us be able to do this. And that was pretty cool to actually be able to sit with your 3D glasses on and view the entire show from any seat in the submarine before we even built it. Then you have something sort of going back. Again, we have a lot of traditional artists in Imagineering. Well, can we find ways to take traditional artwork and sort of enhance it? Because a lot of people like looking at simple, beautiful artwork. Well, can we take that and now add an overlay, add animation? And again, it's just another way to use visualization using a computer. Sometimes the computers are used for exactly what they look like, great CG artwork. Other times it's cool to take traditional artwork and enhance it. Then you jump up to something like total pre-visualization. What does a space look like to a high level of detail before we even built it? Here's one of our restaurants on one of our cruise ships, and we sort of wanted to see exactly what it would look like. This is all the way down to the pattern of the carpeting on the floor, to the exact finishes, to really working through the space. So we can do concept work all the way through to detailed final rendered work. And when you look at the real restaurant, it looks exactly like that. And then we start to go even bigger. So here we have one of our designers in our dish. So this allows us to put on, and yes, it looks sort of goofy, our little helmets with our little red lights on it, and we're actually standing in a space now, full size, looking around with 3D goggles on, seeing what it's really going to be like to be in the space. And this allows us to walk through the space and actually get a sense for the exact placement. We can suddenly, we're a mile high, then all of a sudden we're the size of an ant. We can be any scale, any place, looking at anything, which is pretty cool. Something what the dish sort of looks like today, this is an example of one of our spaces, and they really are pretty big. So instead of having a nice little monitor in front of you to look at, we actually walk into the space. And obviously I'd love to show you some of the stuff we're working on today, but I can't. But they look really cool when you're inside the dish. So it gives us the ability to literally put on a hat and see what something's going to look like that we're going to open in 2017, 2018, and get a real sense for a lot of the details.
And guests can go down to the floor and see the technology.
We have one of our mini dishes downstairs in our Imagineering booth. Please get a chance to look at it, and you'll sort of get a sense for what it's like to really be in a space that's immersive. Again, all different ways that we use technology. This is just one more innovative way to try to use computers to try to help convey a concept or tell a story or help fellow Imagineers understand exactly, so we're all on the same page, what we're designing for.
Thank you, David. So rides and shows and attractions are sort of our bread and butter, but we're also always sort of looking for sort of new ways to engage our guests and new types of experiences, and to sort of talk about how we can embrace what we see as some changing behaviors in our guests. I want to toss things over to Scott to share a little bit of some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, and I don't know if we can get these up on those confidence monitors down here, but that'd be great. What Bob said about not having, or what Asa said about not having a playbook, a rule book to follow is absolutely true. I think back in the day, this was all, you guys were making this up, right? I mean, you were making up a whole industry. And I kind of feel like we're not done with that way of working, because our industry's not, isn't standing still. Our guests' expectations, your expectations are not standing still. The kinds of new experiences we can deliver through technology are not standing still. Even the guests' kind of fundamental feeling about what story is and what experience is changing. You know, a lot has changed over the past, well, however far you want to go back, all the way back to, you know, telling stories around the campfire, up to the kind of interactivity that's possible in today's games and the expectations that our guests are bringing to their park experience. We have to, and we get to, kind of play along with that and kind of follow that along. And one of the ways that we're doing that is actually through more experiential kind of storytelling. Bringing stories to life in new ways, where we're not just telling stories to our guests, but we're actually asking our guests to come be a part of the story with us and actually play a role, or take some agency and some authorship of these experiences. You know, sometimes they're called live action role playing, or they're called alternative reality games, or there's transmedia experiences, all these kinds of things. This is an area that we're starting to look a lot at right now. There is no rule book around this kind of experience still. So we're still very much in this experimental phase. So that kind of let's just do it activity that Dave was talking about, we're still doing that, but now we call them more play tests. We've been dissuaded from putting major heads of state in jeopardy. not prohibited, just dissuaded. But we are doing a lot of playtesting of these kinds of whole new forms of storytelling experiences. And the reason for this is, I mean, stories are great. I'm a big fan of stories. This is me reading a story. I've always been a book guy, and, stories of pirates and superheroes and, and knights in shining armor and all this stuff. I loved these stories. But I wasn't really just fully content to just get lost in the pages of the book. I wanted to be that pirate. I wanted to be that superhero, right? I wanted to play along. I didn't want to watch, I wanted to do. So these kinds of experiences that we're talking now are, hopefully inviting all of you to, at whatever level you want to, engage with us. This is where we're taking whole new forms of interactivity, whole new forms of storytelling, and whole new ways of engaging, and kind of continuing the evolution of those forms of experience to create brand new forms of storytelling. So I talked about how we're actually we're doing this now, but we're doing it in small ways because we don't fully understand the right way to do all of this yet. But we're starting, and we're doing some experiments, we're doing some tests, we're doing some small-scale rollout of things. I wanted to share with you today a little video of a test we did. Actually, it was one of the earlier tests we did that was set at Walt Disney World, and it was set around a pirate story because we felt that was something that we could deliver on. It was a story genre we knew really, really well. But an early test to kind of pull our guests into the story as kind of engaged characters, engaged participants versus spectators, and give you a little bit of sense about what we think might be possible in these kinds of park experiences in the future. So just one little video.
Today, you're going to be at the Magic Kingdom for your experience. And when you're in the parks, we encourage you to do all the things that you would normally do. And all we want you to do is play along and have fun with it.
There's a key somewhere in this Magic Kingdom that will help us. His name is Phineas Dumont.
Yes, I am. That's my name. I am Phineas. 300 years ago, Captain Puffington forced me to steal a treasure for him. You are the descendants of 3 crew members. I've been looking over these journal pages for a long time.
We solved the riddle using a tomb, and it says, follow this point like a star to the sea, to my heir, whose magic will be the key.
Very good. You found the map. Well done, and I heard of a little nefarious plan someone's got.
We can trade information about this map with these 3 pages because he doesn't have those.
Hello, friends! I brought back a crew of people, and they need to become pirates. Aye!
Who's got it? I want the map. That's all I want. Everybody can get their fair share. Does it really have to go down like this? Yeah!
This must be the location!
Well, we gotta dig further right here. Not so fast! Faster down! Whoa, come on!
Thank you, my friends!
So, just because we have this opportunity for this impromptu focus group, does that look like the kind of thing you guys would like to do? Good. All right, we're on the right track. Yeah, so we're never done experimenting with this stuff. In fact, we're never allowed to stop experimenting. Our leadership not only expects us to do these kinds of kind of harebrained experiments and try new things, actually expect us to. Tom Staggs, our chairman, kind of mandates that we be constantly thinking about new ways to provide these experiences to our guests. So we're gonna keep doing that.
Thank you, Scott. So it really sort of takes a particular sort to put together all of these things. And I was sort of hanging out in the back during the last panel, sort of listening to Bob and Alice sort of talk about what it was like, being a creator, working at the desk, the relationship that you guys had with, management, or sort of the lack of management sort of at the time, which sounded like a lot of fun, I must say. Really sort of interested in sort of talking a little bit more about how you do sort of corral a group of really sort of creative, energetic, excited people. How do you make sure that they're all moving in the same sort of direction to try to create really fantastic things? And sort of talk a little bit about sort of what that experience is like. I'd like to hand things over to Trish.
Thank you, Asa. Thanks for having me here today, too. The first thing about managing creativity is making sure you don't hire anyone who actually needs to be managed. So you're always kind of looking for people who are self-starters, who are looking out into the world and who are ready to do stuff. This is our lovely colleague, Ben Schwegler, and if you are like Scott, who inherited Ben, can't manage him, someone came up with a bright idea to ship him off to China, so that happened so quick. It was like, now he's here, now he's I'll let Scott speak to that later.
To be clear, Dr. Ben Schwegler is our Chief Science Officer at Imagineering. He's not a crazy. No, actually,
not as crazy as he looks.
Yeah, no, he is just crazy.
So casting is really important, picking the right people. I think the next thing is, everyone wants to know what the rules are, and the rule is don't write down my rules. Writing and thinking is not enough. You have to actually make stuff. So my note here, we make a paper airplane and make it until it's perfect and make it over and over again. And, I always think if Thomas Edison only tried to make the light bulb 1,000 times, we wouldn't really have a good light bulb. So it takes the doing. And Bob, you know that. That's kind of the lesson that we learned from the early Imagineers. The challenge, of course, is that innovation is super messy, and we are constantly asked, well, write down the procedure for how you did that, write down the process for how you did that. Is there a way that you're coming up with this idea that's going to cost, $10 million or $20 million? And I know that makes people feel much more comfortable, but as Scott said, every idea we do is completely different if we're doing our job right, and we're taking all the tools and the magic available to us, so it's almost different every time. There's certainly guidelines that we try to follow and check ourselves, but it's a messy process, and we can make it look pretty on an Excel spreadsheet, but it's not really what it looks like in real life. And the other thing, so there's a picture of me now, Scott, see? Be fearless. So I lead a whole team for Scott of kind of the inspirational blue sky, the stuff that's supposed to hopefully keep our business relevant. And so I'm always looking out for what that new thing is in the future. And you really have to be, as a leader and as someone who's trying to help others, lead these ideas, be absolutely fearless, be willing to be embarrassed yourself. Scott and I do it periodically just for fun. I think I have a picture of you kind of...
The
and be an example, and I think, my team knows I'm the first one in line to be pulled into legal or HR or finance's office. So I'm their first line of defense. Hopefully they trust me. And then just be curious. And we're so, Imagineers sometimes we're so into our projects, it's hard to lift our heads and look out into the world, but we are a very curious group, and that's one of the things that makes a great Imagineer and just an interesting person in general. So you have to look out into the world, what other people are doing, look what your competitors doing, look at the trends and behavior in the world, and how society is changing, how values are changing, because all of that feeds into how we think about design. So I think curiosity is something that just keeps you young and fresh and innovative. And then nurture the nuggets. I had a great leader who had the art of, I'd go into a brainstorm and think that it was a mess, that nothing good came out of it, and he'd be able to pull these little nuggets like, I think there's something good here and here and here. And so he really taught me how to nurture those little nuggets of there's something fun in there. Where's the fun? And then how do you grow that and test it and make it into something more? And I think that's always really important, to look for those little things that are kind of shining a little brighter than other things. And then, of course, Disney does not support animal cruelty, so I trust me, there were no turtles or tortoises were injured in this test. But again, set up a challenge, and then challenge your assumptions, challenge how you think about it. And I always tell our teams, I give them a framework, and here's what I'm hoping we'll learn, or what we want to try to learn, but you challenge me if I'm completely wrong about it too, and challenge yourself. So we always have to be questioning. And then the feed creativity is literal and figurative. Sometimes that best bit of innovation happens at the very end of the project when everyone wants to kill each other or kill themselves, and ice cream is your best friend, and chocolate is your best friend. And I've fed more teams to get across the finish line, and that's where you push that last little bit, where you can get that last little breakthrough. This is a picture of Phil, and he's obviously got he got the Healthy Food Initiative comment, because I've never seen anyone eat healthy food while working at Imagineering. And I'm sure that's apple juice next to him too. And then collaborate. We have every resource available to us at Imagineering. It's just about reaching out to others and collaborating. And I think it's important, you nurture the nugget until you have something, and knowing when you want to share it. But I think collaborate at the early levels and get peer review at the end and be honest about it. And I think also we want to also be collaborating with our experienced Imagineers and all those young ones coming in who have a totally different experience and opinion than we do. So it's collaborate across the board. And then here's a lovely picture of Scott. So be an example of smart risk. So thank you, Scott, for wearing your protective goggles, and I'm sure that's a fireproof coat. I have no doubt about that.
It was.
Yeah, exactly.
It was.
Oh, so there you go. See, so we have to take risks, right? But we try to be smart about it and safe about it, safety first. But if we aren't out there ready to fail, we'll never get that really great thing that we didn't know we were looking for. And so that kind of leads me to a couple other things, but be encouraging. Okay, so I think this is for your life lesson today. You would be surprised how many people need that extra little bit of encouragement in their day that you didn't know they needed it. From the janitor up to the CEO. Never think that someone didn't need, you did a good job, or I saw that, I see you. And you did a good job. And that's it really is important too. And I remember Bob talking about how Walt used to walk around and he would see something and he would maybe make a suggestion. Sometimes I think that physical appearance of going and sharing, but then helping to tweak in a positive way or giving them a challenge in a positive way is the best thing to do to help an idea grow. And then really celebrate your great failures. I think I'm the winner in my group for some of the bigger failures that cost us a little bit of money, but I'm proud of that because I learned my lessons. And if you can learn, the important thing from failure is actually you learn from it. So it's a failure, it's a true failure if you learned nothing. But if you learn from it, and if we can continue to have the opportunity and the support from our leaders to really fail spectacularly, we will continue to hopefully bring you these really magnificent successes.
And speaking of failure, it's very, very rare.
What?
Awesome.
It was a weird thing. All right, I take it. I'll walk it back. But As Bob sort of mentioned that example of, sort of getting the monorail originally sort of up and running, almost nothing that we do sort of works 100% right out of the gate. And in fact, we in the R&D group are sort of on the bleeding edge of spectacular failure. And somebody who's been present for many, if not most of those, is Susan. And I've asked her here today to sort of share some of our more choice experiences from life in the field.
Thanks, Asa. As Asa and Trish has said, innovations is usually messy, a little messy. So my role at R&D, I help produce playtests. And my mantra has become, never fall in love with the plan, because you just can't. So recently we took Lucky the dinosaur to the New York World Science Festival. And here are a few challenges that we encountered with Lucky. So when Lucky arrived in New York City, he didn't fit.
Is that an exaggeration?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
So the event was being held at, the New York Science Festival was being held at NYU, which is downtown Manhattan. And
You should have done that in Tokyo.
What? There we go. So the streets in downtown Manhattan are very narrow, very windy, cobblestone. So the transport that we had arranged for Lucky could not get into those locations. So at the last minute, we had to redirect him to New Jersey and find a transport to get him in that would actually get him into New York City. Well, we finally did that. And as we were delivering him to his location where he was going to be performing, we were doing that in the wee hours of the morning. Well, there was a gentleman that seemed to be making the park his home.
An outdoorsman?
An outdoorsman,
okay.
Yes, that's good. He was sleeping when we approached, but he came out of his haze to see us coming in with Lucky, and he responded, "This is my park. Ain't no dinosaurs allowed in my park. Dinosaurs, get out." And we were like, okay. So the next day our show was, we had 3 or 4 scheduled performances, and it was scheduled to be an absolutely beautiful day. The prediction was sun and not too hot, and instead we had downpours. So fortunately we were prepared, and Lucky performed because obviously the show must go on. So Lucky came out and entertained everybody in his slicker and his cute little hat, and he didn't get wet. And during the actual sets, the rain actually stopped. Rain before and after, but during Lucky's performances, he actually got to perform.
Here's what I think is great about that, though, and why you're so good at what you do. You had our slicker.
We had a slicker
You
and
had
a
a
rain
slicker
hat.
and a rain hat ready to go.
You have to be prepared, absolutely. So another example of some of these challenges was Wally we had the Wally movie in 2008, and Wally, the star of the movie, had to travel around the world to the press junkets. He was the main talent, so he was walking the red carpet, he was being interviewed, he just pressed all day long. He was a very busy robot. And we had one event in Miami where Wally was scheduled to be at the event at 8 a.m. the next morning. And everything was fine. In fact, I was following through on the shipments to make sure that we were on track. And all of Wally's gear arrived exactly the time it was supposed to. However, Wally had missed his connecting flight. And he was in Oklahoma. And we had to get him from Oklahoma to Miami within a matter of 14 hours. And we did. We figured it out. There was a lot of yelling and screaming on the phone at airport people. So some of the other things that we do is we do projects that sometimes takes us where we need space and takes us into unusual locales. And we recently had a team that needed a lot of space and was working in an area that was very open, and they had there was nobody around, so it was very private. And it's in Southern California, so it never rains in Southern California until it does. We lost the entire camp, and everybody was fine, but they were a little muddy coming back. But
yeah, that wasn't just rain. That was
monsoon.
Somebody did not like what we were working on.
I agree. So anyway, it's just that we we get everything done, we do what we have to do. I mean, we absolutely have to continue to make the magic, so you adapt and you keep moving on and you keep getting it done.
Susan's hair is red because she's been through the fire so much.
Yeah. Well, and it's true, just to give a little flavor of the kinds of things, because she really does do amazing things for, especially at R&D where we, you know, I mean, I know what these requests are like, and it's everything from, we need a secluded desert location where no one can see what we're doing that's at least a mile wide by a mile wide, and we need it for a year, to we need 60 gallons of miso soup in an hour. You know, I mean, it's like...
I've done that.
Yeah, and it's all everything in between.
So, I mean, obviously, sort of reoccurring theme since the beginning has been sort of things tend not to sort of always go as planned. And so I was just sort of wondering if, you know, along the way, inevitably, I'm sure, when trying to sort of create something new, something big, you reach a wall, you reach a sort of stumbling block where it sort of feels like this is going to be absolutely impossible. We cannot persevere, we cannot get through this, we cannot get past this. I was wondering if you could share, you know, an experience like that where it just sort of felt like all hope was gone, yet somehow you were able to make it through to the other side.
We didn't have any of those.
Great, Trish.
Well, I noticed that your new phrase here, celebrating failures. I would have loved to design and install a people mover after the rocket rods were taken away. Yeah. No, actually, we were moving so fast. Remember, we were breaking new ground. And these folks here have a much harder job than what we had. Because remember, when you're doing stuff for the first time, you have nothing to compare to, and nobody's going to criticize you because there's nothing to criticize from. Here, you have all the tools, but you have this backlog of, you know, half a century of building one thing after another, and this is really, really tough to come up with new thinking, new tools, new ways to do stuff. Do it in front of a changing world. The audience, our guests change almost more rapidly now than before, and they have expectations that are so high. I am so glad I was born 50 years too soon.
You know, I think it's a cultural decision to decide nothing is impossible, and that's what we inherited, you know, from you and Walt and others, to say we must do the impossible. But I think when we're installing something, the hours that go into the team and the exhaustion that hits, and you know, where we've had people go, I think let's try nail polish on that and see if that will give us the right effect. And we will try anything. But I know when we're in that situation, there is a solution, but usually everyone needs to go home and go to sleep and get like 8 hours of sleep, get some breakfast, come back. And I always know when you're installing, at the end of the day, you've usually solved every problem, and you get up in the morning and think it's going to be a good day, and every problem is a disaster again, and you're solving problems, but then somehow at the end of the day you solve it, and then you come back in the morning, and then everything's a disaster, and you actually do that for like 3 months, and it's exhausting. But I think sometimes you do get to that point where you're not sure, and that's usually just the team's tired, and so food and sleep, and let's come back fresh and not think about it for a little bit, move on.
Yeah, we don't like naysayers. We're real big on finding ways to get it done. And you'll never hear the word pretend said in Imagineering. You'll hear what if, or how would we, or how could we. And
I'll pretend I didn't hear that.
It's hard. It's tough doing what we do.
But fun.
But fun. It's a ton of fun. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. But it's the painful process of creation. And the innovation comes every single day. And it can be innovative as far as a new story concept or a new attraction idea, or even the process. We're innovating all the time on how we're supporting all the stuff we're doing behind the scenes and with our partners, and all the time finding new ways to innovate. And it's just built in the DNA. We don't, it's almost like it's just part of who you are. You'll find a lot of Imagineers who never want to do the same thing twice. We've already done that. You know, what's a new way to do it? What's a cooler way? What's a funner way? What's a faster way? What's a more... It's just part of who we are.
To add to what Dave said, I have never worked with a more passionate group of people. Imagineers are, I've been with the company for 30 years, and Imagineers are amazingly they're incredible. They work ridiculous hours. They are passionate about what they do. They are tireless. It's remarkable. And I'm sure it was like that when Bob was starting out and the group was starting out, but it's continued. And I think that all comes from Walt and Bob and Marty, and it's pretty phenomenal. I'm very proud to work with this team and work with this group.
There's something about, I was thinking about this morning, our desire as Imagineers, it is like to bring happiness, but there's also this innate belief inside that we can change the world a little bit in a positive way, and that's such a driving force, I think. And when you see something open and you make people laugh, it's this huge thing. You think, I just brought a little happiness to the world.
I think that's also part of the legacy that Bob and the people that we're continuing on in their footsteps, that legacy of that culture exists that allows us to not only believe that we can, if we can dream it, if we can do it, and that it is fun to do the impossible, but, that we've got, to your point, that we've got colleagues that actually make that true. I'm a firm believer that whether you believe you can accomplish something or whether you believe you can't accomplish something, you're probably right. And the way we kind of go about trying to figure out which version of the impossible do we want to go after, honestly, well, I'll just speak for myself. I think about you guys, right? We're doing all this for you and for the millions of people that come to our parks and our resorts and go on cruises with us and adventure tours with us. We're doing this the work we're doing is largely on behalf of you. And so when we're trying to think, well, what should we work on? What should we do? Is this going to be too hard? Is it going to be too expensive? Is this going to take too long? I kind of think about all of you, at least I try to think about all of you and kind of go, well, what do all of you dream that we're working on right now on your behalf? And that's kind of how we make the decisions about what to work on, is we try and guess what you would want us to be working on. And if I have, if my barometer's kind of calibrated correctly, I kind of think you expect us to be working on stuff that's impossible. So, am I right about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, that's kind of, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it.
Our world is changing so much, and I feel like, Bobby, you kind of talked about, you put something out there, and then you were testing ever since, and now this expectation is like, we must put out just only perfection to our guests, but I think we don't want to miss that opportunity of the perpetual beta, that if we can put something out there, I actually think our guests would be okay with imperfection and watching us make it perfect, and maybe even, crowdsourcing and fan sourcing is so popular these days. Is there a way for us to design something where they get to participate in some of those outcomes in a different and unique way? And
haven't you ever heard of a blog called Mice Chat? Lucky for us in our era, we just did it. The guests came, and unfortunately the internet came along. Here come the blogs and everything. Have you ever seen any kind of a subject about Imagineering or any content in our parks, and the guests have ravenous opinions up and down? I love reading all these comments. You do it. You guys are doing this stuff out there. You are such design critics. I feel sorry for these guys here, because it's like, I don't know, do you ever read the blogs, or you just go, don't want to hear about it?
I'm okay.
Because there is such a source of ideas, and I love listening to these comments, because once in a while I'll find a little gem about something that could be better this way, could be better that way, or, oh, this is not going to work, and it won't work because. I think there's so many of the bloggers out there are frustrated Imagineers, and in their own minds they're designing stuff, and then they get on the internet and they just type it out as mad as they can with their little comments, and it just, to me, this is such an entertaining arena. I hope you're participating in it.
There's a question?
Can I tell a quick story about that? I want to tell a quick story about that.
Yeah.
So, you're absolutely right. This is a somewhat embarrassing story. So, how do I do this without embarrassing anyone else? Go for it. So, are any of you familiar with Trader Sam's over at the Disneyland Hotel? Okay. So I happened to be over there one evening after an event down at Disneyland. We were working late, and we were just getting a quick bite to eat and refreshment over at Trader Sam's. And there was another cast member who didn't work at Imagineering, but another cast member who was there. And we got to talking about the new glow at the show ears. If you remember those glow at the show ears, light up Mickey ears that you can wear, and they synchronize with many of our shows and environments around our parks. And this cast member who had been there for a little bit was quite refreshed. Like the guy in New York. Like the guy in New York. She might have been an outdoorsman. I don't know. No, she was, but she actually she gave me a great idea. She sat there at the barn because she had a set of those glow at the show ears, and she said something that was just a fantastic idea. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that is actually a brilliant idea. I'm actually embarrassed that I didn't think about that before, but this drunk girl at the bar has an absolutely brilliant idea, and we're going to do it. She was a cast member who worked it out, and he was just like, that is an awesome idea. And these ideas can come from anywhere.
Maybe we can franchise Imagineering in some way to make use of all the fans.
Yeah.
Legal will love that.
And that's one of those questions that a lot of people, love to ask. Sort of, how does one get their start at Imagineering? How did you become an Imagineer? We know, how did...
Well, Imagineer word didn't come up till much later, but in all truth, in the LA Times, the Peter Ellenshaw painting that some of you used, have you seen the original painting over there that glows in the dark? That was on the front page of the LA Times in October of 1954. And at the same time, I knew from Ub Iwerks, because Ub Iwerks, who worked with Walter very early, was on my paper route. And I was always friends, and I would go over to their house once a month for Sunday dinner, and then Ub would always show movies of current events going on in the studio a lot, and there was a little car with no body. And then one day I got the call to go out to the studio and get out there and talk to somebody, and I thought, you don't suppose that little car needs a body, and could it be related to this thing with the balloon over this fabulous park? And I thought, God, I'd love to work there someday. Got to the studio lot. Yes, there was a little car. It needed a body. And yes, that was Disneyland. And it was going to be designed right there. I got sucked into that company so fast. It was just like, and that was that.
Any other great stories here?
Any great stories how you became an Imagineer?
I became an Imagineer. I was very, very lucky. I was working for a company on the eastern end of Long Island who did special effects in the entertainment industry. It was called Associates in Farron. And in fact, Bruce Vaughn, the creative executive of Imagineering, also was part of our team. And we were approached by Disney to help with the mock-up, the original mock-up of the Tower of Terror. We were a group of technologists based in Wayne-Scott, Long Island. And we did this mock-up of the Fifth Dimension and of the ride. And I guess Disney liked the work we did, so they bought our company. And that's
the soup.
That's right. And I had that knack for finding miso soup. So that's how I became an Imagineer. And that was in 1993. And it's been a great ride.
There are so many people who do want to be Imagineers now, and I know there's probably people in the audience who would love to be doing it, and kids who maybe are dreaming of it now. They've been here, and that may or may not be your path, but you can be almost, I guess, like really we're doing the honorary Imagineer, but I think the world needs all of you to be doing exactly what we do, to think about great solutions, to be curious, to be fearless, to go and create new stuff. And you don't need to be an Imagineer to do that. You can be the new Waltz of your generation. So I would just encourage you to follow those dreams and to pursue them as far as they will take you. That's what is the spirit that we have. That's our legacy and what we were given by Bob and Walt and Marty and so many others. And so it's not just unique to us, it's everybody has it in them.
It's about being problem solvers. I mean, all of us who are Imagineers, we have a lot of different disciplines, but what we have in common is we solve problems every day, tons and tons of problems. And it was true in Bob's time, it's true today. We're about solving problems, and that's not an Imagineering thing, that's a worldwide thing. And whether, no matter what your job is, no matter your school, it doesn't matter, you also, every day, are confronted with interesting problems. What are you going to do to solve it? Are you going to come up with a clever solution? Are you going to use a pat solution? Are you going to go out of your way to work a little harder to come up with something that might work but might not, but boy, if it did work, it's really cool? that's the measuring mindset. It's not going for the easy solution. It's not going for the obvious solution. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes that is the right solution. But often, I had a friend of mine who always lost his car keys. And when he would find his car keys, he would keep looking after he found them. I'm like, why are you still looking? You found your car keys. Because, when you're looking for something, you find something else, you go, oh, there's what. He goes, well, why stop? Just keep looking, because you're going to find something else. That's actually pretty smart. So, even when we come up with a solution, we'll still spend a little more time beyond that, saying, okay, that's great. That's our current placeholder. Now let's keep looking a little further. So it really is about problem solving. And you get some of the most innovative solutions by looking even after you find your car keys.
Yeah, and again, we have a culture, I think, you mentioned Bruce Vaughan and Craig Russell, who are the co-heads of Imagineering. They set the example for this. We have a lot of real challenges. The kind of work we do, which is very innovative and it's very groundbreaking and it's very, problematic in so many different ways. And now we're such a global company that this gets magnified tenfold. As we start thinking about the global scope of the work we're doing, we have a culture, I think, that not only encourages us to embrace these challenges, but demands that we embrace the challenge and not turn away from the hard problems, but actually embrace the hard problems, because those are probably the ones that are worth solving the most.
Where do the big ideas come from? Where did the next big notion for an attraction or for a new ride system?
I thought you were going to give us soft lobbed questions or something.
People in bars.
Yeah.
Bars.
The little nuggets.
Martinis.
Come from anywhere.
Yeah, they can come from anywhere.
They do. They really do come from anywhere. They come from humorous conversations in the restroom. They come from taking trips and vacations to different places. They come from hallway conversations. We have an open door policy, and you will constantly see people standing in the hallways talking, and you just happen to be walking by, and I am often grabbed. I was walking through our booth downstairs before this, and I had a couple of managers go, hey, we got to talk about that thing we were talking about yesterday. Come on, let's talk about it. So, we came up with a couple ideas that might cost a whole lot of money. We'll talk about it later. So they literally come from anywhere, and there's a lot of studies that have been done on creativity and problem solving, and the one thing that most creative people have in common is the belief that they are creative. And once you believe, I can come up with a cool idea, I am good enough to solve that problem, guess what? You probably are. And therefore you are now open to looking for solutions everywhere. And therefore problems don't bother you. As I'm saying, you don't turn away from the hard ones. You embrace them. Like, cool, what great challenge do we have today? And can I tell you how many times your day starts perfectly fine, and by your 9 o'clock meeting, you're already like, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to probably solve this problem? And it'll be solved by 4. It'll be, the next problem will come tomorrow, sometime. And that's just part of the process. But you can't, you can't shy away from the hard stuff. And all too often, people look at the word work as being a bad thing. It's not. Work is a great thing, and hard is a great thing. Where is it written that things are supposed to be easy, and easy is something to be striven for? It's not. You go for the hard stuff.
Trish talked about curiosity, and I think that's a great source of our, where ideas come from too, because Imagineers have to be a curious lot. In fact, we actually kind of encourage Imagineers to go off and try new things. We even have a program where, we'll pay you to go learn, to go do something, to go try something completely different.
I went to space camp.
Yeah, I know.
It was amazing.
So Asa with a couple of other Imagineers, or at least one other Imagineer, went to space camp, and he will not stop talking about it.
It's true.
I think
but he loved it, right? And he brought back ideas, he brought back inspiration, and we have Imagineers who go do those kinds of things, or they'll go travel to Tibet, or they'll go take a class in pottery or science, or learn a new piece of, learn a new musical instrument or something whatever their source of creativity, whatever their source of inspiration or curiosity, wherever it takes them, We want to foster that sense, because being curious and tackling challenges and being successful over here, those are skills that you can then apply to your whole life and bring it back to how you're dealing with Imagineering's problems as well. So I think curiosity is a big piece of where new ideas come from.
So knowing what you know now, having had the sort of work experience that you've had, if you could go back in time to the very first day working with the company, what advice would you give yourself?
Permanent curiosity of everything you don't know anything about and will probably never use. Guess what? If you do that, you'll have a brain full of ultimately useful information, totally unpredictable, and that's the heart of being an Imagineering brain.
I'm gonna need a martini to top that one.
Good care.
But when I was hired, I was told we either have to hire you or kill you because you know too much. So I'm like, okay, let's negotiate. So, but I think I would just tell myself, stay fearless. When you come in a little bit more as a hired gun, you are a little more fearless. And I was been told I'm a bull in a china shop, and I think I'm so sweet and gentle. But apparently. So I think you learn to, I would probably tell myself, learn to be a little easier up front, but don't lose that fearlessness that gets you the results that you want.
I would have done more things knowing that they're probably going to fail, but knowing that my bosses aren't going to yell at me if they do fail. And that's important to know that you are encouraged to try lots of different things. And a lot of people are worried, oh, Dad's going to smack my hand, and I'm going to... It doesn't happen that way. Yeah, they'll say, okay, you just wasted $1 million, we'll try to fix that later. But you probably learned a whole lot. Learn a lot in the process, and you're developing that sense of a little bit of fearlessness, a little bit of exploration, a little curiosity. All those things go together, and you don't want to stifle that. And unfortunately, a lot of companies do stifle it. So we try to go out of our way to say, try the new things. Don't be afraid to try the new thing. And we're not going to yell at you if it doesn't work, but constantly be encouraged to try the new thing.
I think for me, in that these 30 years have gone by so fast that to embrace, and I do, but to embrace and love what you do every single day, be passionate about it. We are very lucky. We work in an amazing place, and I think that is the biggest lesson. I mean, is just love what you do, and you'll work hard, and you'll never be unhappy.
We do have the luxury of working with some of the most awesome people on the planet. I would say that if I were to make a T-shirt, to give myself on day one, it would say something along the lines of, constant success means you're not trying hard enough, means you're not pushing hard enough. We have to have a little. We have to be pushing ourselves to the point where we are continuing in those territories that Bob talked about, those uncharted territories. That's where we need to be spending a lot of time, is in those uncharted territories and figuring stuff out, and not always successfully at first.
And to that end, we're running a play test today in our booth. So if you haven't come and tested our juju, we invite you.
And on that note, thank you guys so much. Much appreciated. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you.